Well, good day, everyone. It's great to be here with you again for another Breakout Leaders Luncheon Time chat. We're excited to have Karen Barrettberry here with us so that we can talk about how you really leverage and lean into your strengths so that you achieve your true potential and have the kind of performance and impact that you want to have. Amy and I are the co-creators of Breakout Leaders, and we are on a mission to empower ambitious leaders by championing human-centered leadership that integrates whole person success with organizational impact. I'm Mary Axelson, the owner of WeMax Consulting, and this topic is very much in line with what I do from a business as well as a personal perspective. So I will turn it over to Karen so that she can do a brief introduction, then Amy, and then we'll jump right into the conversation.
Yeah,
Karen?
thank you, Mary. And Amy, do you want to go and then I go or?
Go ahead, Karen, and then I'll.
Okay, sorry. Okay, sounds good. So Mary and I go way back. We worked together years ago at Unum, which is where I currently am. And I head up talent management for the company. I've been here almost 17 years. And prior to that, I had worked at another insurance company in Connecticut and in Philadelphia. And I can say that my time here has been the best of my career. And my goal is to stay until they don't want me anymore or I retire. But it's been a great gig and great opportunity in the talent space.
Thanks,
Thank
Karen.
you, Karen. And I'm Amy Wood. Mary and I go way back to many
Mhm.
years, and we've been collaborating for a while now. We both share an interest in, I would say more than interest, a passion in developing leaders. And a huge part of that, we agree and talk about this all the time. It's really honing in on what our strengths are and developing our strengths rather than trying to focus on what we're not good at, and trying to make that better because that just is stressful. So a huge part of what we're talking about today is focusing on strengths because essentially it's going to give you more energy and reduce the overwhelm and help you be more focused.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So Karen, when we were discussing this topic and potential guest panelist, your
Mhm.
name immediately came to mind for me, reflecting back on our time at Unum. And I always thought you were so incredible in this space. I got a chance to listen to you coach and help so many leaders. And the approach that you always took, I found inspirational because you helped leaders understand their strengths and how to lean into them more. What might get in the way for them when they're under stress or we're not feeling as secure and what those strategies might be to address it. So thank you so much,
Thank
for
you,
being
Mary.
here. I think our audience is really going to benefit because we're tapping into one of your strengths while
Yes.
we're having this while we're having this conversation. So
Yeah.
let's just start off by you sharing a natural strength or skill that you have and how it has consistently helped you in your leadership role. And then let's turn that upside down and say, what about a skill that you might be good at, but you don't really like it? And how do you deal with
Yeah.
it too?
Yeah. Well, I would say, and I know a few people on this call, so they might chime in at some point to agree or disagree. But I would say a strength has definitely been my interpersonal skills, people skills. I care about people. I'm really interested in people. And I think that serves me well in the role that I'm in because it is about talent management. It is about really, to your point, Mary, understanding people's strengths and really helping them to understand the importance of those strengths and how those strengths can then lend themselves to maybe helping them to improve where they need to improve. Like to Amy's point, I think if we go from a place of, strength and things that are, maybe underdeveloped, to go from a place of like, I'm really no good at this and I need to be excellent at this is unrealistic. So instead, what can you do? What opportunities do you have to either leverage your strengths or even lean on other people? To help compensate where you may have, um, you know, uh, yeah, a weakness, I suppose. Don't even really like to use that word, but something that's underdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as like the things that I'm good at that I don't like, that one I've been thinking about that for a long time. And Mary, you know me really well. Maybe you can come up with something. I mean, I suppose, that when you have bad news, right? You have to deliver tough feedback, to somebody, and it's really in the spirit of trying to help them to be at their best and to address some things that can be addressed, right? And not addressing them is going to be detrimental. Like I don't love that, but what I say to people is like, it would be easy for me to just ignore this and not say it, right? Because it'd be easier for me. Like it would make me, it wouldn't be as uncomfortable. But I do owe it to you to tell you this or to share this with you or to share, my observations because without it, you may never know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was about the best I could come up with. Did you have any ideas, Mary, on
Well, no,
something that you think?
I think it's perfect actually, Karen, because
Okay.
it was actually the one I was thinking about.
Hmm.
And so it was around, you said delivering difficult news. I was thinking about conflict.
I
Uh,
don't like conflict. I
yeah,
really
yeah,
don't. But
yeah.
it's not good to keep it
Right.
bottled, right? Right. So,
Yeah, no, so I think you channeled that and brought
hmm
that energy forward because sometimes when we have to deliver bad news,
hmm
it does create a situation where there could be a conflict. And even though you may not enjoy it, I think you're incredibly good at it. You bring out empathy and compassion and stay grounded and are clear on the purpose and the intent
hmm
behind it. So then that, helps to move through what can be a really hard conversation. So
right.
thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
I also was thinking when I was reading these questions and getting ready, I was actually thinking about myself on that second part. And one of the things that I'm good at is solving problems. And at one point in my career, I found myself in a place where I was being tapped to solve reactive problems. I really like to solve problems before they become a problem. So anticipating them and getting ahead of them. And yet I was being seen as someone who could go in there and really solve them after they had already happened. And so I had to do some work from a brand perspective to help those around me understand that, yeah, I want to do problem solving, but I want to do proactive to strategic problem solving, not more reactive. So that was the example
hmm
that I came up with. Um, but Amy, I'll turn it over to you so you can ask Karen our next
Sure.
question.
So I would say when it comes to my strengths, probably the thing I'm best at is communication. I've always loved the idea of communication. And I'm, really good writer. And I think I'm especially good at taking very complicated concepts and distilling them down into something more concise that is easily understandable by other people. So any form of communication, writing, speaking, listening is a big part of that. I'm a good listener. And I just want to add here, we're talking about strengths right now that I think have a lot to do with the work. And it's important to consider when we're talking about strengths that we want to look at what we're good at. And when I say good at, I mean what comes naturally to you. So think of something that someone might compliment you on all the time. And you might say, well, that's easy. Those are the things that are your natural strengths, and you don't make a big deal about them because in our culture we think things have to take hard work to become a
hmm
strength. And so we think, oh, whatever. But those are the things to focus on. So when I think about being away from work, I think about, I'm really good at swimming. I love to swim, and that really helps with my work because when I'm swimming, my mind is cleared, and I'm able to focus more when I go back to my work. So I often tell people in coaching, even if you can't do more of what you love at work and you're not really crazy about your job, the more you do outside of work that you love, that comes naturally and helps you to feel in the flow of life, the more you'll bring to your work.
hmm
That's
We
great.
we have focus on career development, career management here at my company, and we've run several programs around like really how to lean in and get what you want, whether it's in the job you're in or the job you want. And one thing that really stayed with me is to find that sweet spot between what you're good at and what gives you energy or joy. And so I think about somebody I work with, and I know, Mary, you know, James knows, a woman named Kim Bolton, who's like the example I give all the time. Like, she was an underwriter for 20 years and she was a really good underwriter, you know, but that wasn't where she had her joy, right? So, like, as she's moved into the talent management space, she's found that sweet spot between what she's good at and what gives her joy, you know, what gets her excited to come to work every day. So that's the ultimate goal as it relates to our jobs.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a great example, Karen. Thanks for sharing that. So
Mhm.
Amy, do you want to ask our
Yeah.
next question?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm wondering, we're talking about strengths, and all of us, if we focus on using our strengths and developing their strengths more, we're going to feel better. We're going to enjoy life
Mhm.
more, probably be a lot more productive with things. But there are times when we have to do things that we're not good at, we don't want to be good at. What do you do in that situation? I'm wondering, Karen, like if things at home or at work have to
Right.
get done, but you don't want to do it and you don't have a talent for doing it. And the idea here
Right.
is if you were delegating things that you're not good at, that's giving you more room in your life to do the things you
Yeah.
are good at.
Right. Well, I would say it's a combination. Like, if you're lucky enough to have a team, right, you can, you know, have people that work for you and with you who maybe complement your skills, right, including where you have weakness or opportunities. So there's definitely that, and I'm very grateful for that. And then there are things you just have to lean into. Like, I don't love getting into like the weeds or real detail orientation, but I have to sometimes. You know, when it comes to creating decks for our CEO, for example, around talent, when it comes to like budget or really dissecting like what's happening, you know, in the budget and why we're off here or whatever. And so, do I love it? No. Am I great at it? I'm okay, right? But I just have to lean in and do it. So there's some things that you just have to do,
Mhm.
and it makes you stronger. If I think back in my career about like my preferences to be more flexible and spontaneous, for example, like if you think about Myers-Briggs, you know, I was definitely a very strong P, but I've had to lean in and become a strong J around my schedule and how I allocate my time and how I plan out to make sure that I'm meeting deadlines, right? So some of it, you know, just through pure like just getting through it is going to result in maybe better habits that then don't become so painful, you know.
Mhm.
So hope that makes sense. Sometimes you just got to do it, make the
Yes,
time
yeah,
for it,
I agree.
and lean in.
A good example of that I'm thinking of for myself is I'm very introverted, but to be
Hmm.
successful in my career as an entrepreneur, I have had to train myself to be extroverted at certain times. I can't just say, oh, no,
Hmm.
I'm not going to get out there. I'm not going to network, for example.
Right.
Um, so, Mary, what do you think about all this? What do you delegate or what do you do despite wanting to delegate it because you have to do it?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on the conversation right now, and one of the things that's just popping for me is the fact that what we're discussing right now requires you to have a certain amount of self-awareness. Okay, that you have to understand, who you are from a strength-based place, and where I like the word that you're using, underdeveloped, Karen. Where are those places
Hmm.
where you're underdeveloped? We talked about what brings you joy, what brings you energy, what depletes you.
Mhm.
And Karen, I know that at Unum, you deliver assessments. And
Hmm.
so I was thinking maybe, and you had brought up Myers-Briggs, but I know that you're certified in Korn Ferry as well as Hogan. Maybe
Hmm.
you could talk a little bit to us, like if I'm in a place where I need some help with raising my strategic self-awareness, understanding what
Hmm.
those strengths, those values, those motivations are. Can you share a little bit about how assessments can help you do that and how you've used them
Hmm.
for yourself and then also in the leadership development work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spend a lot of my time doing this. And when Mary and I worked together, we were literally side by side in a cubicle. So Mary heard me do a lot of debriefs and could probably recite it in her sleep at some point. But yeah, so we do a combination. We're working with our executives right now, where we're using the Korn Ferry assessment called Leadership Solutions, which really focuses on a number of things core to who you are, like your traits, which are your personality characteristics, your drivers, what matters to you, what motivates you, and what you value in your work. It looks at learning agility and it looks at risk factors, right? So it's all about what you put into the assessment and, how you answer the questions. You prioritize like what's most like you and least like you. And it will then result in an assessment that will, if you're going into it very honestly and not just thinking, wow, what should I say? But going into it very honestly, even when the results come out a little bit low on things like optimism or persistence or whatever, for the most part, the people I'm working with can say, I understand, why that might be, right? So we have that conversation that I think will start by heightening awareness. And then where there's areas for opportunity, right, where they might want to focus, they have more clarity on like what those things are and how they might get there. So then we also combine it with a Corn Ferry 360 that's focused on 12 specific competencies related to what we need from leaders at our company. So that combination of this is what I'm telling the assessment through the way I answer it, and then the 360, how do people experience me, can be very powerful. But all of that can be extremely difficult, whether you're good at feedback, whether it's really challenging, no matter what, right? Like you're kind of making yourself vulnerable, you're putting yourself out there. And so back in the day, like when I would have taken strengths finders, my number one strength would have been positivity. And that is real, because I really do believe that, even where you have maybe some opportunities, you probably have so much more, in that strength bucket. Like that's really make sure we're focusing there and leveraging that to help us with our developmental areas. And I also recognize that when people go to look at 360, for example, or their results, it's we always as humans go to that place where it's low, right? Like we very seldom go to the place where like, wow, that's amazing, that's great feedback, or wow, I am really strong on that. And I guess it's just part of the human condition. But I really try to get people back to like, yes, it's important to understand where you have opportunities, but it's equally as important to really lean into those strengths. And then something Amy said around, I think you said this, Amy, around there are things that we're good at that we say it's no big deal or it comes easy to us, but it doesn't come easy to everyone, right? So to really take kind of stock of what those things are. And then if you're lucky enough to work on a team or work with others, I always think about like, here's what I'm good at and what gives me energy. And then I'm lucky enough to have really good people I work with that can augment, supplement, like can complement and help me, to be even more effective.
Yeah, that's great, Karen. So if I'm in an organization or if, like, for example, for me, I'm an entrepreneur, and maybe I don't have access to Corn Ferry or Hogan,
Mhm.
for example, Amy and I are also Hogan certified and do that in our
Yeah,
two
that's a
partners.
great assessment
Yeah.
as
So
well.
that's not our case, but if I am
Mhm.
somebody like that, is Strengths Finder someone an assessment you would recommend for somebody, or is there some other self-service assessments that individuals can tap into that might help them with raising their self-awareness?
Yeah, I do think strength finders can be really helpful, right? It gives you language, it helps you to point to positivity or woo or, some of those other things. So that can be helpful. There's also, free assessments kind of in the Myers-Briggs space as well, just knowing who we are and just heightening that awareness. But then another thing that you could do is do a little bit of an informal 360 even, asking people that you know and trust if you're willing and able to be vulnerable, because it is very challenging. Just like, here are some things that are important to me. These are things I'm working on. Would you provide feedback? Would you be able to, give me any insight into how I show up for you, how you experience me, etc. Could be really valuable.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. I love that. When I was making the decision to transition from corporate and to launch my consulting firm, another thing that I did is I started logging when I had moments of high. when I
Smart.
was feeling really energized and motivated, and what was I doing in that moment that was resulting in me feeling that way. And then just the
Hmm.
opposite, when was I doing something that was draining, felt very difficult, something I probably would procrastinate, because we tend to procrastinate things that we don't like to do.
Hmm.
That was another way. So in addition to, I also asked, people to describe me, ask them for their perception on the same things that I was assessing myself with. So
Yeah,
that's
that's really
great.
smart. It sounds like good situational self-awareness, Mary, right? So I know,
Yes.
here's my plug for one
Yeah.
of my favorite traits, but situational self-awareness, the way it's defined by Corn Ferry is about being very present, like in the moment, that we're not distracted by, oh, there's a squirrel or whatever, or other things that we have on our minds. And it's really paying not only attention to the impact you have on other people, like reading the body language, reading, listening, to what people are saying, but it's also about really paying attention to the impact you're having or the emotions that you're feeling, speaking to what Mary was talking about, like when am I at my best and what are those circumstances can really help, as you do need to adjust a situation to get back on track, or to get, the results you want as you're working with other people. So
Yeah, one of
Yeah.
the things that I
good stuff.
really loved going back to Strength Finders was the fact that they share that there's some things that are just innate to us, like we were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
And the more energy and effort that you put into them, the stronger, the better you're going to be. You're going to feel more fulfilled and joy. And then
Hmm.
there's other things that no matter how much effort you exert, you may make a little bit of progress, but you're not going to make the same level of progress or have that same level of fulfillment if you focus in on your strengths. And so, for example, I love
Hmm.
to sing. I have no natural singing ability. So no matter how much I sing, nobody's going to see me on the stage. I'm not going to be a rock star. I had to give that dream up, type of situation. So I liked Strength Finders from that perspective too. So
Right.
at this point, I really would encourage the audience to throw in the chat room a few of your strengths, or
Yes.
if there was an experience that you had that helped you understand a strength that you have. And then, Karen, I'm going to put it back to you to say,
Hmm.
can you share a story with us where you made that decision to focus in on a particular strength, and then how that created a breakthrough moment for you, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, I think, think back for many of us, right, when we're starting our careers, and especially, starting basically in the early 90s, right, that it was, boy, it just felt like it was so much more important to lean into, like to focus on those weaknesses, right? Like any development plan would have been like, you have deficiency here, and you better really focus on this. And whether it was society, whether it was just learning, whether it was the HR community, but it was pretty, apparent, at least at some point, that you're going to have, diminishing returns if that's all you're focusing on. So, it really comes back to like my choice of, work that I do is about people. I'm in human resources and I like the human aspect of it. So doing everything that I can, to lean on my ability to build really good relationships, to have a level of trust, which then can lead to influence, it has been really important. So I think, for me in the early parts of my career, obviously when I was a lot younger, I would probably spend more of my time worrying about what I was not good at versus really taking stock of what I was good at. And so
Mhm.
one good thing about getting older is it does give you perspective. And so I like that, I would still like to be 20 years younger, physically, but there really is something about like accepting who you are and knowing that some of the things that you bring, are really important and, for your success, and lean into it and
Mhm.
stop trying to like fix yourself and stop worrying and being overly concerned about those areas where you're not good. Like I don't want to be a data and analytics person, even though it's extremely important. Like it's really, really important. But that's never where I'm going to be really good. And that's never going to be where I'm going to find my joy.
Yeah, that's a really great example. James just put a note in the chat that I want to call out about vulnerability. Being vulnerable was key to refining from StrengthsFinder. More specifically about the return on your investment. Absolutely,
Mhm.
James. That's great. And Amy and I talk about this all the time, that we only have a certain amount of energy. And so where are we making those withdrawals? Where are we making those deposits? How are we reinvesting, in our energy? And it does require us to be vulnerable and open. So
Mhm.
thanks for sharing that, James. So
Right.
Amy, why don't you ask Karen our final question? Believe it or not, we only have 3 more minutes and then we'll be wrapping up by
Yeah,
quick.
so I think, the greatest thing I can think of about strengths, once you find out what you're good at, you can collaborate better with other people because everyone can
Mhm.
decide what they're good at, and then you contribute your best and solve problems more quickly. Um, you make better progress, you come up with better ideas about things, and people feel more energized because they're doing what they do best. So, Karen, I'm just wondering if you could share an example of how you've brought together people in a collaborative way and help them through that to understand and capitalize better on their own strengths, which are always unique.
Yeah, I can think of a specific example back in, and I think Mary was still, we were still working together. But back a number of years ago, we, had a bit of a change in my organization, and I had an opportunity to rebuild that organization. And I was very mindful, and as intentional as I could be to bring in people that had different strengths than mine. So I think about I have a lot of Kims in my life, but another Kim on my team who is really, really good at the details and the data, and she's extremely organized. And, and I made that really clear to her in the beginning and part of the interview process, for example. And it was a big part of, as I created that team, really thinking about where we have needs and where we already have strengths and where we have opportunity. And so we still, and we still, are a team today, and we still talk about like how she appreciates some of the things I bring and how I really appreciate what she brings. And I could go around my whole team and, we talk a lot about like, who's going to take this. And a lot of it is because of their interests. Maybe it's a developmental area, but quite often it's because this is where they have strength and they get a ton of energy.
Yeah.
So again, lucky enough, if you're on the team or it's your coworkers or whatever. But like I found even way back in the day when like Myers-Briggs was the big thing, just having awareness of like, well, who are the introverts, who are the extroverts, and there's value in both. Who are the J's, who are the P's, and there's value in both, right? So the more we know about each other, the more we know about ourselves, the more we can seek out those opportunities to complement, our strengths and our developmental areas.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important, and this is something all of us can do to notice the strengths in the people you interact with and let them know. Because in our culture, we spend so much time pointing out what we don't like and what's wrong.
Right.
And even if you really don't like someone, you can find a strength as long as it's genuine. Let someone know, whether it's I really like that hat you're wearing today, or you have a great sense of humor. I love how you organized that meeting. Thank you so much. It means a lot to people, and when people hear what their strengths are, it might help them discover something about themselves they didn't know already. So
Right.
Yeah, I love that, Amy. Karen, you brought this up earlier, but I want to highlight it as we close out. We
Mhm.
talked about self-awareness, but we also, Karen, I think you said as you've aged, and become, I believe we become much wiser.
Mhm.
And in that process, we become more self-accepting. So it's not only about having the self-awareness, it's also about having the self-acceptance of who you are, honoring it and living in that space, because ultimately that leads to more self-love.
yeah,
So
Right.
we'll end the conversation with three
Excellent point.
selves: self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-love. So
right.
thank you
Love that.
everyone for joining
Thank you
us
very much.
today. Karen, thank you for sharing all your
Thank
incredible
you, guys.
insights and experience. It's been a fabulous conversation, and we can't wait to see you next month for our next Breakout Leaders session. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mary.